Okay, so now we're going to solve the equation 12x squared minus 23x plus 5 equals 0 algebraically. So since this is a non-linear equation, and we see that because the x squared has a square on it, so it's nonlinear, we know that we need to move all terms one side, leaving a 0, which it already has that feature, and then we factor it and use the zero product property that says a times b equals 0 when a is equal to 0 or b is equal to 0 to solve for the equation, solve for x. Okay, and because the leading coefficient on the x squared is not equal to 1, we're going to use that new method called the AC method. So AC method is an extension of what we had been doing in the last chapter. Let me move this out of the way. There you go. And what it's trying to get you to see by saying AC method is that the A and the C in this equation, we say it's ax squared plus bx plus c. The a and the c get multiplied together. So we're going to multiply 12 times 5, which is 60. And it's the factors of 60 that we're looking for, two factors that sum to negative 23. So I'll start working down my list. Now I know that since my product is positive, yet my sum is negative, that it must be some negative number combination. The negative will make a positive sum, or a positive product and a negative sum. So I'll start with 1, -1 and negative 60. So -2, -30, -3, and -20. Well, I'll pause right there because -3 minus 20, when you sum them together, is -23. So those are the factors of 60 that I am looking for. All right, so if you recall, so the next step is take your 12x squared, write it down, but split up the -23 into those two factors. It's going to be -3x minus 20x, right, and then plus 5 equals 0. And now we'll factor by grouping. All right, so I need to ask myself, what does 12x squared and minus 3x have in common? Well, in both cases, they are both divisible by 3 and an x, so I'm going to factor out a 3x. Okay, and then what remains? So I'll do a little scratch work off the side. So again, so 12x squared divided by 3x, that is equal to 4x. So I get 4x, so that's the first one, and then I'll do my next term, so -3x divided by a positive 3x is going to be a -1. So I get a 4x minus 1. I move on to my next pair. What does -20x and 5 have in common? What's the common factor? Well, in this case, both are divisible by 5. So I'll work those out. So -20x divided by 5 is -4x. Okay. So see, I'm factoring out a -5. I guess I do need to be careful here. So this is negative, so I'm pulling out negative. It's -5. So let me go back down here, change in red. I'm not going to divide by a positive 5. I should divide by -5, so I get a positive 4. And the reason I need a positive 4 is so that both of these factors match up. So 4x. So 4x. And then 5. Then 5 divided by -5 is equal to -1, which is good. So my 4x matches the 4x, the -1 matches the -1, so I get -1. Okay, all that equals 0. All right, so I have my two terms with a common factor of 4x minus 1 and 3x minus 5. And as always, you can see the 3x minus 5 just sitting right there. Okay. Now, eye on the prize, what are we trying to do? We are trying to solve for x. X equals, we need x equals a number such that when we plug it in, it creates 0 when all the arithmetic is done. So I'm asking myself, when does 4x minus 1 equal 0? Well, it happens when, let's see, 4x add a 1, and then divide by 4, when x is 1/4. Or, on this side, when does 3x minus 5 equal 0? Well, that happens when 3x is equal to 5, and then divide. So x equals 5 divided by 3. So potentially what I'm saying my answers are is x equals 1/4 and x equals 5/3. So to check that, maybe I'll use my calculator this time. I'm going to say, go to my main screen, 1/2 store into x. Okay, so now x represents half to my calculator. And then I'll type the equation 12x squared minus 23x plus 5. Oh, well, goodness, look at this. I was grabbing the wrong value. So I'm going to say 1/4 store in x. 1/2 is not a solution at all. So it's representing 0.25. Okay, so let me just scoot this down so I can read it. So now 12x squared minus 23x, subtract 23x, and then add 5. Okay, so if 1/4 x is my solution, if I push enter, I should get 0. And I do. Good. So that works. All right, so now I'm going to check my other solution, which so 1/4, I'll circle it because we know it is a solution. And now x equals 5/3. So I'll go back to my calculator and I'll say 5/3 store into x. Enter. Okay, and then I need to re-enter the 12x squared minus 23x plus 5. But remember, if you push second enter and then do it again, second enter, it pulls up the last thing you've been typing in this whole time. So there it is, 12x squared minus 23x plus 5. I push 0, enter, and I hope to see a 0. Well, what is that? 1e to the negative 12. Okay. Well, in your calculator's mind, that is basically 0. And I'll show you why in a second, a little bit more clearly. Now, remember that we put in a 5/3, and a third gives you a repeated decimal. And so you see this 1.666666, and eventually had to round the number. It wasn't exact, it had to round it to 67. So because your calculator rounded, it got really close to 0, but not quite 0. That's why I have this e to the negative 12. This means really, really close to 0, but not exactly 0. Your calculator is estimating. So 1e, it's kind of like that. Let's see, and it was to the negative 12. Okay, what that represents is 1 times 10 to the negative 12th power. And if you remember, 10 to the negative 12th power is basically dividing by 10 12 times. Or in fact, it's 1 divided by 1 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's see, 12. All right, that is basically 1 divided by a trillion. So 1 divided by a trillion is indeed a very, very small number. In fact, we might as well even call it 0. So your calculator was really, really close. It was like 1/trillionth off from 0, but there it is. So your calculator says, yes, this 12x squared minus 23x plus 5 is basically 0. We actually know it to be exactly 0. And so we can confirm that indeed 5/3 is also a solution. So I'll circle that, and we'll call it a wrap.